I've come around on Michael Saylor, and I think what he's doing on the corporate level, that's going to be this cycle's big thing. Whatever you think about it, that's where we're going. The train on that, I think, has left the station, right? I think, with the Cantors getting activated, with the Trumps getting activated, with, Jack Mallers going to join Tether to do the company, like that's what's happening this cycle. That's going to be the thing. And the idea that you're going to have multiple billion-dollar companies start buying Bitcoin en masse. I mean, I think that movement is just going to wake a lot of people up to the core value proposition, was the scarcity part, right? So maybe like abstract all the bells and whistles, because there's a lot of stuff that's not so great, right? Like it's moving Bitcoin ownership and exposure to like, share structures where the person doesn't have custody. There's, loading these capital vehicles with a ton of debt and like hoping they don't spiral out in the eventual bear market, which we know is going to happen, and could be actually exacerbated by how these companies are structured. But look, they're getting the word out there about the scarcity piece, right? And I think that's becoming something that now is like, it's entering a different year, right? We've been saying it for a long time. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. I've been saying it a lot. I've known it for a long time. I feel more recently that, there's only 21 billion. Even I feel that, right? And I think that's kind of the message that stuff sends. And that's just waking people up and getting activated to what you were talking about with the game theory. I think it'll play out. And, what's the upside? The upside is it's going to send this message out, and it's going to broadcast it really loud. The downsides are real. The trade-offs are real. And I think educators are gonna have to get the word out, because there's a lot of people who are going to come into Bitcoin this cycle and get exposure to Bitcoin in ways that probably aren't what we want them. We probably don't want them to have those experiences.
Let me break this down for my fellow Bitcoiners. In just 8 weeks, I've seen a serious shift. More strength, more energy, and fast muscle gains. The reason? FITSCRIPT. They ran 124 biomarkers, blood, hormones, inflammation, and built a fully custom plan: nutrition, training, supplements. No guesswork, no templates. This is functional medicine meets precision fitness for high-performing men who want sovereignty over their health. If you care about optimization the way you care about your money, test, don't guess. Don't trust, verify. Hit the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to check out FITSCRIPT and see what's possible.
The institutions are coming was like the meme from 2017. I remember that was like,
well, every cycle has the meme. But it feels realer this time.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And yet I thought that the narrative for this cycle was more aligned with nation states are coming. Sovereign nations are buying Bitcoin or are going to mine Bitcoin. And it turns out that, it feels like every other day now there is a new Bitcoin treasury company that's leveraging themselves up to the tits to buy Bitcoin.
Those are the new ICOs. I bet there's going to be 1,000 of them. They're going to be, the question really, I think, is what does the wreckage from that look like? And that's why I bring into like the negative aspects of it, where it's, you're going to have a lot of people who have exposure to Bitcoin, quote unquote. But what do they really own? They own, shares of these like opaque equity vehicles. But look, we've seen a lot of different cycles in Bitcoin adoption, right? I think where the zen that I've reached, right, is that there's, sometimes in the cycles if we focus on certain properties, right? But that doesn't mean the other properties go away, right? Because we still use Bitcoin for AI stuff. Bitcoin's still just as good in developing countries. It's just that I think a lot of the people who onboard are going to get a specific flavor, and that flavor is going to look like the orange tie, the guy in the orange tie, right? Like that's the new thing that's happening in the cycle. And so, the question is really like, what does that look like? How does it play out? The upside is, what MicroStrategy has done is going to be done at a larger level. The downside is, absolutely, we don't know what happens when the leverage washes out and you get the crash there. I know that this is called Why Are We Bullish, so I don't want to get into too many bearish scenarios, but I have some real bearish scenarios that I can draw.
Fun. Why Are We Bearish coming next? I was in a wave pool this weekend, and like in the UK, and this guy asked me what I did, and we got chatting, and he was like, "Oh, so you're into Bitcoin?" So this Michael Saylor guy, like, if he was, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like he just went straight in with that. And that was the first time I'd had it where someone just said, Michael Saylor is the first thing they think about when they think about Bitcoin, because he's just such a convincing advocate. And he went on to say, like, the fact that he is so convincing and that he is just so eloquent, and the way he talks, it is really, really incredible the way that Michael Saylor just packages up his ideas. And he went on to say that even if this guy was selling me, petrol, or he was selling me, Beanie Babies, I would probably consider leveraging myself up with Beanie Babies after that. And he was almost saying that he's so good that he's too good. And I'd never really thought about it that way before. Because if your first touch point is someone that is as squeaky clean and this orange tie and a multi-billionaire who's turned his company around, you are kind of looking at that and being like, that is too good to be true. Whereas a lot of us came through this idea of like, is it going to work? You got to put the work in to understand it, and then you understand it. Whereas this guy is just literally putting it on a plate and saying, listen to me at the end of this podcast, and you will, buy Bitcoin, you use your company to buy Bitcoin. And that's something that I just thought was quite interesting. I was thinking about that when you're discussing the nature of this cycle.
Yeah, I keep thinking like why I missed it, and like it seems so obvious, like in retrospect, where it's like, okay, you were gonna get this era of Bitcoin probably where like the financial people were really into it, right? Like, that never really happened, right? If you look at all the kind of 2013 was very merchant focused, 2017 was very Silicon Valley ICO kind of stuff. 2020, 21 was very counterculture, like felt like Bitcoin was cool and like politically, politically outside the mainstream. I felt like we're always going to get the stage where it's like the stage where it's like CFOs and accountants, like we're going to think it was cool. And I'm like, and I always go back, I'm like, why did I miss that? Because that should have been like pretty obvious that we would get that thing. I think it's just that personally and culturally, it's like I wanted something else. Like I still, the thing that I think is interesting about Bitcoin is the changing of the financial system and moving away from kind of the US led system and the Wall Street led system. And so the fact that this is kind of entrenching that, that doesn't excite me, but I think it's going to excite a lot of people. I think that's the thing that's starting. And I think your experience, I think was probably going to become what looks like, pretty normal in a few months to this year.
Or they miss it entirely, and a lot of the finance people are just going straight for the tickers for Bitcoin related companies, and I think that's quite interesting. They end up down that rabbit hole, and it trends a lot. Like MicroStrategy must be one of the most talked about stocks of the past 2 years now, and now everyone's talking about Semler, and I can't keep track of them all.
But I'll give you an oddball one, like like it's like, can you really do bad by holding Bitcoin, right? Like if you hold Bitcoin, like, are you really, like, what's the worst scenario? And like you can even look at like very extreme scenarios, like so there's this famous kind of 2017 ICO. It's like the worst ICO. They did a year-long ICO. It's called EOS, right? And they have 150,000 Bitcoin. And now you're like, okay, well, it's like they can just go public, and they're all of a sudden they're a Bitcoin treasury company. You pro-rata distribute shares to everybody who invests in the ICO, and boom, they're a public company, and they're regulated in America. And they're a large Bitcoin bank, right? You can just poof, like this thing that was like this awful nuclear toxic waste level thing in the industry, could just be reborn because he who has the Bitcoin right now, has the opportunity, right? Like everybody wants it, they have it. The U.S. regulatory system has free and cleared them. They've paid their fines for delivering no products to these investors. So you look at that case and you're like, oh, okay, well, like this company that's been defunct for like 7 years, like they own a bunch of Bitcoin. You can do something with that, right? You can rebuild that into something useful, hopefully, or maybe it just continues. Like I don't know, right? But I think the lesson of the story there is people who own Bitcoin have tended to have more opportunities than people who have less Bitcoin, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was to comment on that sort of narrative, I think the one thing that I could criticize Michael Saylor for is the lack of a sort of narrative around proof of reserves. I think that that's something which is such an important part of the Bitcoin story. And, we have a lot of doubts. You can't log into X without seeing people talking about paper Bitcoin these days. And the simple truth is there's no way to know either way. We just don't know. You can argue about it, you can debate it, but there's just no way to know. So, if he had done his Bitcoin for corporations with a stronger focus on that kind of thing, I think we might save ourselves a lot of pain further down the road.
Don't you think, like, even if they prove that they own the Bitcoin because it's tied up in so much leverage, it's like even if they like owned it and like you could see it in proof of reserves, it could still just like poof at some point, right? Like it would just, but maybe you would see it in real time, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that, it would at least be a little bit more transparent what they're doing. And it would create more trust in what they're doing. I'm not saying that trust would be fully deserved, but I'm just saying it would create more trust. Right now, we have a lot of people, and I think it will just keep on. I think this is a narrative that's going to grow, that people are going to look at these new entities and they're going to say, well, do they actually have the Bitcoin? Maybe MicroStrategy has the Bitcoin that it says it does, but what about this new XYZ Limited? I didn't necessarily know anything about them, and their guy, we only heard about him a month ago. I just think that that's a narrative which is, as I say, is going to grow. I think it's a missed opportunity that could have been built on right from the start, and now it's going to have to be reversed engineered in, probably on the back of one of these bear market events that you mentioned, Pete.
I think I think the proof of reserves thing is important, because it's not only just, does MicroStrategy have the Bitcoin, but where is it custodied, and how many other entities is that exact same institution custodying for, and is that institution, is there instances of paper Bitcoin there? Because at least if there's a specific set of UTXOs that belongs to an entity that everybody can audit, you can begin to piece together, and you can say, okay, well, this company says they have this much, this says they have this much, these are their UTXOs, and you can start to piece together. Whereas when it's opaque, there's no on-chain footprint to specifically point to, and that's where you can get into, well, until the maths out to more than 21 million Bitcoin, then there's no for sure way to say okay, well, there's clearly, obviously there's paper Bitcoin somewhere, but it makes it a lot harder to dick around when they can say these are our UTXOs. Bitcoin Well is the best place to be buying and selling Bitcoin in Canada and the US. And now with Bitcoin Well Infinite, it's also the best place to be making large buys at their OTC desk of over $50,000. Their white glove service gives you fast transactions, no slippage, and the lowest fees. You can scan the QR code on the screen or simply head to bitcoinwell.com/BTC sessions to sign up today. And you can share your own personalized referral link to earn commissions.